The Arkham series is some of the most successful and beloved superhero games of all time, and they are composed into this masterfully told story that spans over three legendary status titles. And today, I want to talk about why I love them so much and why they are so incredible. I've been playing the Arkham series since I was 9 years old, back when Asylum came out. And even as a young child, I knew Asylum was incredibly different from any game in the genre at the time. Rocksteady took an approach that did the source material justice. This Batman game felt like it was ripped straight from the comics, and the game's grittiness never pulled any punches. I played all of these games over several times, finding and appreciating the game's hidden Easter eggs, but it started with Arkham Asylum. Maybe I loved that game so much and still do because it felt mature, developed, and like something your cool uncle would show you. This was a first for superhero games at the time, and it still applies today. We haven't gotten anything like this since then, and that's what's drawed gamers in, and that's what draws anybody into anything, whether that's TV, games, movies, or any form of media. New, refreshing content is what we seek. Obviously, this game's strongest suit is the atmosphere, setting, and sense of realism. As realistic as a game based on comic books can get, that is. Another reason this game reeled in gamers was the introduction of the free flow combat system, a style of combat that isn't inherently difficult and it isn't trying to be. What it strives for is to be fun, enjoyable, and satisfying, and trust me, it's really satisfying. Flying from corner to corner of the room, landing punches on the asylum inmates, it's just awesome. The plot revolves around Joker being admitted to the asylum. He breaks loose and causes chaos by releasing everyone in the asylum as well. Having Batman scramble to once again lock up all of these villains that he originally put there is really fun, and the banter that he has with them while doing so is super entertaining, and it starts to dig into the world building and character development of this series. As you can imagine, a lot of these villains aren't happy to see Batman back in the asylum because he's the one who put them there, and now he's trying to put them back in there again. The asylum is open for you to roam its grounds. It's broken down into multiple sections like the medical ward, the botanical gardens, the Arkham Mansion, intensive treatment, and much more. My favorite area to explore is mainly the medical ward because it gives off some super haunting and creepy vibes, much more so than the rest of the map. But you also get these types of vibes when you're going through the catacombs underneath the asylum and the tunnel systems. All of that is really cool. There's a lot of nooks and crannies in between these different sections of the map that help you get around as well. This game was just insanely refreshing for its time, and it still is. I'll always praise developers for trying something new, and that's what Rocksteady did. In fact, that's what Rocksteady did with every installment of the Arkham series. And almost every single one of these aspects is improved upon with every installment of the series. And that brings us to Arkham City. And that is where I think this series strikes gold. The narrow, cold hallways of the asylum open up into a narrow, crowded city-state penitentiary, and that is the perfect step that a sequel should take. In fact, Arkham City takes many steps in the right direction. In almost every way, it's a much better game than Asylum, especially when it comes to the combat, and we get a lot of new tweaks here to the system that improve the overall experience. The free flow combat system becomes a lot more fluent, and I think the series really finds its own identity here with Arkham City. It's where the series etched itself into the Gaming Hall of Fame and became one of the biggest games of the year it released. I think Arkham City's strongest suit is its story, We get something here that is super unique and engaging. Without spoiling anything, a section of Gotham City is closed off and used to house inmates from Arkham Asylum, and it's titled Arkham City. Almost every one of Batman's greatest villains ends up running around here, including the Joker once again. In short, Joker is poisoned from the Titan formula that he injected himself with in the previous title. Joker ends up poisoning Batman with his own blood, and that puts getting a cure, the responsibility of getting a cure, onto Batman. The story mainly revolves around Batman getting Arkham City under control, but he is now doing that while trying to find a cure for himself and the Joker. Like I said, it's super unique and super creative, and seeing the Joker act in a really desperate way and trying to get Batman to do something for him is a really, really cool dynamic here, and I love it. For the first time in the series, we are introduced to side missions that have some awesome Batman villains such as Victor Zsasz, Hush, and the Mad Hatter. They're all really different from each other, and some of these characters were actually introduced in the previous title, but left a little to be desired, and thankfully we get that here. I could do a separate video on Arkham Asylum and Arkham City as well, even just on the side missions of Arkham City I could talk about for days, but here I just want to talk about the cohesiveness of this series as a whole. In City, we get many more villains popping up at every corner, more so than we did in the previous title. And it's also really important to note how this series approaches Easter eggs and little hidden Easter eggs that you can find that hint at certain things. Arkham Asylum was chock full of Easter eggs referring to villains that never appeared in the game. So, for example, you may find an abandoned cell in Arkham Asylum that is covered with dates posted all over the walls, insinuating that that was Calendar Man's cell. And when you now go into the next game, the sequel, Arkham City, you'll encounter Calendar Man. So a lot of these Easter eggs in Asylum actually end up having meaning in the next sequel, and that makes this series really thorough, and that does continue on into the third game in the series, Arkham Knight, that I'm going to get to in a minute. But like I said, villains popping up at every corner, and they're all popping up because they're all confined to the city of a prison. All of the villains are starting to form their own followings of henchmen, whether that be Joker, Two-Face, or Penguin, and all of these henchmen don't necessarily get along with each other. As you're traversing the world, just exploring the open world, you'll hear the Joker henchmen maybe talking trash about Two-Face's henchmen, and they don't all get along, and they have their own little followings, all these villains. And what this does is give us a tremendous amount of world building here, and it pays off. The immersion here is outstanding for a game based on comic books. As a comic book lover myself, a lover of all things nerdy comic books and stuff like that, being immersed in the world of Batman in the DC universe, feeling like you're there, is what I want from a game like this. This game does do open world, but on a much smaller scale, and it's great for their first time around. They didn't want to blow up this open world and do something too ambitious, and they saved that for the mega finale to this series, Arkham Knight. Arkham Knight is the first and only next-gen title of the Arkham trilogy, until Arkham Asylum and Arkham City were remastered, of course, for PS4 and Xbox One, with the Return to Arkham bundle. But Arkham Knight was built for next-gen, and there was a 4-year gap in between the release of Arkham City and Arkham Knight, and they did this to be able to achieve their epic conclusion to their next to flawless trilogy. In Arkham Knight, it all comes out. We get access to all of Gotham. In fact, it's probably just about 4 times larger than the map of Arkham City. You can see here on the screen, Arkham City is a small island, and the map of Arkham Knight is sectioned off into 3 separate islands. Gotham here is complex. It has multiple levels, multiple sections, multiple accessible buildings, which makes it much larger than just 3 islands. You get these multiple sections you can explore, so it's a multi-level experience here. It's a diverse city you get to explore. It's really fitting that for this finale we got all of this opened up to us. Seeing the GCPD, Wayne Tower, Gotham Square, and Ace Chemicals are all elements to this universe that finally tie things together. It's great just as a casual gamer fan to experience all of these things is really great. But as a comics fan and as a fan of the series, seeing the GCPD, seeing Wayne Tower, and seeing all of these things ties together this universe, because many fans have been wanting to see what the rest of this world looks like and what the rest of Gotham looks like since they've been playing Arkham Asylum. Like in City, every aspect of this game is improved upon from the last. The combat, the stealth, traversal, side missions, the main plot, they're all approached from a new, fresh angle, and next gen hardware, which is now, I guess, previous gen hardware, utilizes it all well. We do, of course, get the new edition of the Batmobile, and it's done very well. I do think the Batmobile is a bit overused here. It honestly overshadows aspects of the game that fans loved, like the stealth Predator missions. I would have gladly accepted more stealth missions here over the Batmobile tank battles, but the new edition is welcome. I just believe it dominates majority of the gameplay here, and it separates itself from the rest of the series. What we get here, I don't want to talk about it too much because I really don't enjoy the multiple aspects that we get with the Batmobile here, but in short, the Batmobile becomes a tank, and the forces that you're fighting in this game send out drone tanks, unmanned tanks for you to fight, and a large section of this game becomes tank combat, and it's just not what I was looking for in this game. I would have loved just to have the Batmobile, maybe a couple street races, a couple chasing villains through the streets, but I don't think we needed a battle mode in the Batmobile. But what they give us is it's good, it works, it feels satisfying, the mechanics of the tank work well. I just personally don't enjoy it that much. And I think the aspect of the tank and the gameplay here really separates itself from the rest of the series, and it for a second there forgets what actually brought fans in the first place. But what Arkham Knight does well is create the ultimate Batman sandbox, and that's really important considering it's the final title. It's the finale to the series, and open world sandboxes keep fans entertained for years to come, and they did that well. Every once in a while I found myself booting up the game again just to glide around the city and have that escape, that sense of freedom. And it's all rendered beautifully. This game is 6 going on 7 years old, and it looks like it could have been released yesterday, without a doubt in my mind. I don't know how Rocksteady did it. Our main villain here is Scarecrow, and he's been popping up in the series since Arkham Asylum, but now he is the main villain, and he has a man leading his militia, the Arkham Knight, and they aren't bad by any means. I think Batman taking on these two different forces at the same time works for the epic conclusion to the series, and you do feel like Batman is juggling a lot here. And as you play the game, you start to feel, damn, this might be Batman's last laugh. Like, it is really climactic. And there are more villains here to talk about, but I don't want to spoil everything in case you still plan on playing this game. But what I do love, and what a lot of people love, are side missions. Some people enjoy side missions more than the main plot as well, because you get to discover them with your own exploration. And I think they do the side missions here maybe even greater than Arkham City did. I really feel like Rocksteady learns from each game that they make. When they made Asylum, they just started fresh. And when they made City, they learned from everything they did with Arkham Asylum. And when they made Arkham Knight, I really feel like they learned and improved upon everything that they did in Arkham City. Side missions are a way for you to experience these more obscure Batman villains. And I, for one, love the Professor Pig side missions. And he has left you bodies around the map that are left for you to be discovered, and eventually you're led to his lair where you confront him, and the entire thing is just bone chilling and really dope. It's some dark shit, and it's really, really cool. There are tons of content here that keeps you busy for a while, and like I said, that's what you want with the final installment to a series. Arkham Knight ties together a lot of what the series is known for while making a lot of new additions as well. I love the Arkham series because of how grounded it feels within the lore of the comics. They managed to take a semi-realistic approach without sacrificing it because of the series' outlandish villains, and it works really well in all three titles. You've probably noticed with the first two games they're a bit more comic booky with their style than more so than in Arkham Knight, and Arkham Knight combats this by redesigning some of the villains and Batman's armor so that it slightly fits into this more climactic style of game. Arkham Knight gives a great resolve to the series, and most of all, it's satisfying. It feels like a conclusion, and that is super important to fans because we knew going into this game it would be the final installment to the Arkham series, and that is how it was marketed, and they delivered it. I feel like the plot and the story of the Arkham series could be its own series of comics on its own, and I think that's why I love it. It respects the source material a ton to an unprecedented extent, and that's something that comic fans will appreciate. It's also something that will immerse gamers into the universe that much more. All of these games have stood the test of time, and they have worked their way into the Gaming Hall of Fame, at least in my books. These games are absolutely classics that you should experience.